What's going on, everyone? Thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to get into those flagging issues that we've seen in pro motocross this season and some possible solutions. I feel like there is a real problem here, but I don't want to just complain about it. I also want to bring some solutions to the table and talk about that as well. So let's get into it. All right, so we've seen a plethora of flagging issues in the past, and especially this year, we've seen a number of incidents already, and we're not even through the full pro motocross season. The three main incidents that come to mind this season are the Garrett Marchbanks incident in Paula, and then Haiden Deegan at Redbud and Jason Anderson last weekend at Spring Creek. So the first one that happened this season was the Garrett Marchbanks incident at Paula, which was during press day, and there was already a few riders on the ground in the video. When you see Shane McElrath come over, he lands on the bikes, and then eventually Garrett Marchbanks came over and he landed on the bikes. Now in this particular incident, there was no flagger, and Shane McElrath pretty much had to run up the hill and do it. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to get there in time for Garrett Marchbanks, but he did save Dylan Ferrandis and other riders. Either way, there was quite an outcry as to why there would be no flaggers, and there was also no medical staff on site to help Garrett Marchbanks with his injury. Now, it sounds like this boils down to a communication issue with the flagger where they thought they were supposed to leave the track when they were not. Whether or not that's true, there definitely should have been a flagger there, and the whole thing could have been avoided. Moving on to the Haiden Deegan at Redbud incident, quite a bit different than the one that happened with Garrett Marchbanks. This one was in a race, and the flagger that is in question was standing right on the jump. He was blue flagging for lappers at the time, but he was not even a volunteer flagger. He was an actual AMA staff, and he had a yellow flag in his hand at the time. There was some debate on whether he had to go get a yellow flag, and that's why it took him so long to get the yellow flag out, but he actually can be seen holding a yellow flag while waving the blue flag. Personally, my concern with this incident is not whether or not the Haiden Deegan incident could have been avoided or not. At the time that guy crashed, the flagger was trying to spot lappers and give them a blue flag, so by the time he had noticed that the guy was even down, Haiden had already gone off the lip and the yellow flag would have been irrelevant. However, I am concerned at his response time once he did realize that there's a guy down and his bike is in the middle of the track on a blind landing, as he just kind of stands there and mopes around while somebody else rides up on a pit bike and tells him, "Dude, wave the yellow flag." Haiden Deegan literally had enough time to run back over to his bike, get back on it, and ride away before that guy even thought about waving a yellow flag. I do think there's an argument that can be made against volunteer flaggers, but this guy is an AMA official and he still didn't do a very good job. Now fast forward to Spring Creek and the Jason Anderson incident that happened during time qualifying. We see a totally different type of scenario and problem pop up here. So we already have a couple guys down on the downside of a blind hill. There is a flagger right there waving a yellow flag trying to notify the riders that there's riders down, but Anderson just rides right by and ends up collecting himself into the pile of bikes. Now obviously Jason's not going to put himself in a situation where he's intentionally putting himself or other people in danger. So my theory is he probably either did not notice the flag or he did and he just thought it was a caution flag, meaning be careful, down at the bottom of the hill there's some riders down, and not, hey, if you jump off of this you're going to land on somebody. Either way, there's a breakdown between the flagger and rider. Just exactly what that was is kind of hard to say, but definitely ended up pretty bad. Could have been worse, but Anderson was obviously upset. So just based off of these three incidents that have happened alone in this year, we definitely have a problem. If you zoom out and look at all three of these issues as a whole, they're all pretty different. One was during press day, one was during a race, and one was during qualifying. One had no flagger, one had a flagger with no flag, and one had a flagger with a flag. So these seem to be a lot of different issues that could be kind of hard to tackle. So as I had mentioned, I do want to bring some ideas to the table. So my question would be, how do we try to solve this? What could we do to fix this? Well, again, if you zoom out and look at it, the one thing that these all have in common is they're on a blind jump or landing, or basically the riders don't know what's going on the other side of the jump. Obviously, if the riders can see the issue, they can avoid it. They're professionals. They know how to go around something that's a problem. So I think it's fair to say that the biggest time we need to be aware of something like this happening is when the riders cannot see it until it's too late. So how can we better inform these riders that there is an incident up on the track that they might not be able to see coming before it's too late? So the first possible solution I think we should discuss is going to be caution lights. We've seen them effectively used in Supercross. They can draw your attention pretty well. LED strobes are pretty bright even in the daylight. And you could monitor and trigger them remotely from one area where you say you just have a camera monitoring the blind section of the track with a strobe light connected to it. And if you see any type of issue come onto the track at all, you can activate the strobes, notifying the riders that there's an issue on that section of the track. While I do think this is a good solution and it could definitely bring some benefits to the racing and probably solve some of these problems, I do also have some concerns about it. So my biggest concern about the caution lights is just that we're not exactly telling these riders what the issue is and what to do as they're leaving the ground. If you have a physical flagger there at the jump and they're good, and the rider's down on the right side of the landing, then that flagger can stand on the right side of the lip, waving a yellow flag pointing to the left, and the riders will know to stay away from the right side of the jump. So if there's only caution lights on the takeoff of a jump, it's really hard to say what a rider should be doing. If we were to use the tabletop that Haiden ended up crashing on as an example, really the only safe thing to do would be to just kind of roll and jump onto the top of the tabletop and see what's going on the backside instead of jumping the whole jump. So in that situation, you could theoretically end up with some guys that are wanting to roll the jump basically and others that are still trying to jump it. Now you have this whole other conflict you've created on whether or not it's safe to even jump the jumps that have caution lights on them, and it basically could theoretically turn into almost like a wheels on the ground type of light situation. All of that is to say that I think caution lights could be helpful, but only in conjunction with real flaggers. I feel like they could improve the situation, but it's not a real solution. Sticking with the topic of lights, another solution we could talk about is putting little light bars on the bike. So we know that there's already the technology to have light up bike parts, and we've seen it in Supercross, and it does work pretty well. And I think there is something to be said about using that to help notify riders of what's going on around them. Maybe you could do something like a light bar across the handlebars or even on the front fender. And as long as you made it big enough, bright enough, and obvious enough, you could technically use multiple colors to give the riders multiple notifications, blue if you're going a lap down, yellow for caution, red for wheels on the ground or the restart of a race. With that being said, though, I don't think this is really a viable solution for multiple reasons. The first of which being, obviously, you will see your handlebars and especially your front fender while you're riding, but that's not necessarily your focal point. Your focal point is on what's ahead of you, and that is why flaggers and lights can be more effective because they are basically in the area that you're looking. I don't think it'd be fair to the riders to try to draw their attention away from the main focal point of the track and onto their bike to try to make a decision on what they should be doing on the track. Additionally, in pro motocross, you have so many more guys entering into the race, and it would be not very cost effective, especially for the smaller guys, the privateers and whatnot, to try to wire up their bikes with these new safety systems. It would require quite a bit of infrastructure and somebody constantly monitoring the system to try to get it to work. And while I do think it probably would have some efficacy, it's really not that effective in solving the problem either. The only way I see this being anything viable is if they make it an optional thing that you can purchase and add on to your bike, and they find a way to basically integrate the system with the track for a relatively cheap price. I really don't see how that would be achievable, and it does seem a little bit unfair that the teams with the bigger budgets would have more information on the track, even if it is for their own safety. So, in my opinion, it's not really going to work. The third solution we could talk about is just having all professional flaggers that travel with the motocross series to every single stop. It's the same flaggers for the most part. There's no volunteers. Everyone has headsets. They know what to do. They've been trained, and they're not hesitant to get on the track and direct the riders in the direction they should be going instead of just standing on the side of the track and waving whatever flag is relevant. We've seen Feld do this in Supercross, and it is pretty effective. The flagging seems to be quite a bit better in Supercross than motocross. And in my opinion, it's probably mostly due to the fact that these guys are trained professionals, they're in helmets, and they do this every weekend. They're not trying to watch the races necessarily. They're used to being around these guys. They're desensitized to the danger and the sounds of the bikes, and they're not just a fan at the track. Their only real concern is making sure that they keep the riders safe and that they do their job correctly. So I 100% think this is something MX Sports should be doing. They should be having professional flaggers that travel with the series. They probably should be wearing more safety gear, and they should be willing to get out in the middle of the track as necessary in order to clearly communicate which direction the rider should be going in. In my opinion, with the Jason Anderson incident, that flagger probably should have just been in the middle of the track with his arms out, saying, "Back it down, don't go off of this lip, or you're going to crash." Or, better yet, probably in the entrance of the corner would have been an even better spot where he could have taken to more of a middle position and just said, "Hey, stop, shut it down," especially with it being a practice session. So in that particular incident, I do think a quote-unquote professional flagger would have probably prevented that issue. However, I do still have my concerns because, as I had mentioned with the Haiden Deegan incident, that guy was an actual AMA official, and we still had a real problem. I don't think he could have prevented the Haiden Deegan incident, but his overall reaction was pretty poor and nothing to be proud of. I do think if we had all professional flaggers with some good caution lights on the bigger jumps that had blind landings, you'd probably see relatively no incidents moving forward. But I still feel like both of those solutions have some pretty big weak points. There's been countless times of riders not seeing lights in Supercross, and that's at night. Then as far as paid flaggers, we just saw that completely fail at Redbud with the Haiden Deegan incident. So again, I think both of those are good things to do and probably something we should look into moving forward, but I don't think it's necessarily all we should do. I do have one other pretty interesting solution to talk about, and that is in-ear communication. So I know this can be a controversial topic, and there are some people out there that say, all other motorsports have in-ear communication, why aren't we doing it? The other side of the argument is motocross has never had anything like that. It wouldn't be fair for the riders to be able to know where everyone's at and moving over, cutting each other off, things like that. I understand both sides of the argument, and I think I have a good solution to that as well. So I definitely don't think we need two-way in-ear communication. While it is possible, the riders would have a hard time talking most of the time anyways, and I really don't think that we need that. All we need for safety is one way where the in-ears can receive from one central frequency that is a race command that can warn the riders, hey, there's this X incident on the track, avoid this portion or this side, or roll this jump, whatever the case may be, to direct the riders in whatever direction they need to go to stay safe. Not only would this help in the safety of riders to keep from, say, landing on each other and things like that, but it would also help cut down on things like red cross flag penalties, because it would be very cut and dry to the riders that, hey, you need to roll X jump or you're getting a penalty. Now, obviously, this isn't completely foolproof either. If you're locked in a tight battle and there's a lot of engine noise around you, there's a good chance you might not be able to make out what is said. But overall, I feel like it brings the most to the table in solving this problem and other problems. It should be relatively affordable to roll something like this out, since it would just be a one-way communication device from one central location. All you'd have to buy is one headset and receiver. There won't be any advantages by riders being able to know where another rider is on the track, and I just feel like it would help elevate the safety of our sport in general. So, with all of that being said, I don't know that there is really one clear-cut, good solution that fixes everything, but I feel like with those three things, the caution lights, the professional paid flaggers, and the one-way in-ear comms, we could see a significant improvement in rider safety. Obviously, I wouldn't expect that to all be rolled out at once. I know that would be pretty expensive. You could probably do it in phases where you bring on all paid flaggers next season, work on the caution lights as you progress through the season, test it out, and then maybe bring it on full-time at the next season. In my opinion, in-ear communication in motocross and supercross is coming. It's just a matter of when and how. I do think that we need to be careful, because two-way communication could be kind of dangerous, or just specific one-on-one rider communication with, say, like a spotter could be an unfair advantage to certain teams. Personally, I'm not really here for that, but I do think one-way communications with a race command could be extremely beneficial. I'm curious to see what you guys think. Let me know if you have any other solutions down in the comments below, or what you thought about my solutions. But that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.